Hello and welcome to the Top Order podcast. There are 12 days in Christmas, but in this Ashes series, only 11 days of cricket until the contest was decided. We'll break down the third test from the Adelaide Oval and what comes next for both England and Australia in this episode of This Week in Cricket. We'll also touch on the New Zealand versus the West Indies test that's also been completed at Mount Maunganui just today, with New Zealand wrapping up the series against the men from the Caribbean. All that and more after the swish. I pushed the wrong button.
I'm going to leave that in. That's good. I like it.
Sorry, everyone.
Mixes it up.
Slightly wrong button. There we go.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, boys, that was a calamitous failure with the audio equipment just by my left foot. Speaking of which, not a great test match in Adelaide for the England boys, Jamie, but there are signs of life in this England side.
Yes. Yeah.
That's not the lead-in I would.
That's not the lead-in I was going to give you. Okay, I'll give you the proper lead-in. All right. Some signs of life, Jamie, but is anyone deserving of praise in this England team coming out of the Adelaide Test match?
Yeah, so there was a little bit of life, wasn't there? A bit of fight. And actually, there was probably a number of opportunities in the test where England maybe could have gone on and been successful. But ultimately, I think the players that probably carried the biggest praise is probably Stokes, Crawley to some extent, and I think Archer. Archer has been arguably pretty phenomenal in this series, given the amount of or the lack of cricket that he's perhaps played coming into this series. He's certainly taken a lot of the hard yards when England have been in the field. But I think, yeah, fair play to Stokes. He's been the talisman, hasn't he? And kind of lives and breathes what it is to be England captain. Unfortunately, I guess the standards have not been where we'd want them to be for everybody else. And Australia have just been superlative, I think, in all their disciplines. Very, very disciplined, been very difficult to attack, and have seized the moments, have kind of delivered under pressure when it's really, really necessary and been really needed. But yeah, not really much more to say in terms of positives for England, I think. In that sense, it's been a pretty brutal and tough watch, I think, from the Northern Hemisphere. The sleep deprivation has caught up absolutely, and has not been worth it, I have to be honest.
Raj, from a neutral perspective, was this performance by England better than the first two tests? I mean, it's the closest England have got in the last 18 tests to beating Australia, I believe. If Cricinfo was to be believed, this defeat is actually the closest they've got to Australia since 2010. Which you mentioned off air just before we started the pod, is the last time England won a test match in Australia. And it's been pretty lean pickings since then. I think this is the fourth series consecutively that Australia have won on the bounce. Prior to 2010, 2011, Australia had won 5 or maybe even 6 series on the bounce, going all the way back to 1990. So it's been lean pickings for England for a very long time now. But has this test match in Adelaide shown you anything to take positives away from this going forward for England?
Yeah, it's interesting you put it that way. I again wouldn't put it that way. I think that they were still quite well outplayed in all facets of the game. Again, if you look back to that first test in Perth, and you sort of match it up to the sort of first session, first innings or first day that was played, this was a much better England team, definitely, than that first day, first innings of Test 1. They showed a lot more fight, a lot more resilience, but I really think they were on the back foot for pretty much the whole game. I mean, Jofra Archer batting alongside Stokes in that first innings got them back within sort of a football field length of the game, but realistically they were out of this game for a long time, and they're going to have to do some kind of heroics to actually sort of get there, or even get the draw on that last day. I was impressed with, you mentioned Crawley in your opening address there, Jamie. I actually think that he's actually a great case study for England to look at. He had a horrendous first Test match. His batting, I don't know, it did not resonate with scoring runs and a successful opening stand. But he's actually come back really well in his next 3 out of his next 4 bats. He's actually scored runs. He's looked good. And batted time. And I think that's the key. They haven't gone out there trying to blow the shackles off. They're waiting for that ball to sort of put away. And that's the sort of difference. I mean, if you take away Joe Root's 100 in the second test, it paints an even gloomier picture if you do want to look at it like that. But I was happy that Jofra Archer looked like he found his rhythm in this test a little bit more. Took the 5 for in the first innings, and I actually liked Cass. He looked like he was around to cause a little bit of trouble at times. When we sort of end up doing the post-mortem, which I guess it is a post-mortem after sort of 3-0 down, it'll be interesting to see, how England rotated their bowlers or chose their bowlers. Bashir, who we all thought was going to probably play all 5 tests, looks like he might not even play a game now. So it's just very interesting. It hasn't gone the way most thought it would go.
It certainly hasn't, and there's lots to unpack even in the short set of points that you made there, Raj. But just to pick up on one of them, the times in which England have looked good in this test, and I agree with you, they were chasing behind the 8 ball from 160 onwards. And if you think about the first innings deficit against Australia was 85, and then they lost by 82. If they could have achieved parity with Australia on first innings in that top 5 in particular, and there are lots of things to unpack in some of the dismissals for England in this test match again. But from that point on, they actually played Australia pretty close to evens throughout the remainder of the test match, particularly in the second innings. And the times where they did that, they were prepared to put away the spectacular in favour of doing much more of the ordinary. And it seems to be a formula that's going to continue to work for them going forward. I mean, Stokes and Archer put away spectacular shots and just played good cricket shots in the first innings. When Jamie Smith and Will Jacks looked good, they were positive, but without being reckless. It's the reckless dismissals that are killing England throughout these first 3 tests. And look, as an Australian fan, I'm just really glad that we got to the end of the Adelaide test before England have figured this out. Because if they could figure this out en masse, they would be a very dangerous prospect for Australia. And they could still be a dangerous prospect for Australia going forward. But they just don't seem to be able to holeless bowlers figure out how to put away the almost compulsive desire to create spectacular shots, like the T20 mindset, right? I have to do something spectacular here versus going, well, actually, if I bat for 150 or 170 balls, I'm going to get 80 or 100 runs. If I'm like Jamie Smith or Harry Brook, if I bat for 170 balls, I'm going to have 150 to 170 runs because they just score that quickly anyway. Jamie, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I kind of, it feels like they're caught between a rock and a hard place, though, because the whole mantra has been super aggressive cricket, and they've kind of played the first 2 tests and gone, okay, well, that probably doesn't cut it. So now we're having to do something different, and to change that approach mid-series, mid-game is really, really difficult, I think. And kind of what you're still seeing is that some players have worked it out, they need to bat time, but then the rhetoric coming out of the camp is, play each moment, be positive, take on the risk if it's there. So there's this kind of, feels like there's a bit of a mixed messaging that's going on a little bit, which then adds to confusion, which then leads to even more maybe recklessness by players because they're just unsure. It's just not, as Raj says, it's just not gone the way in which I don't think any of us expected. I think we probably, as bullish as I was, I think we thought it would be closer. I think we genuinely thought that these 2 teams were closer matched than what they are. But in reality, every opportunity that England have had to maybe seize the the initiative or the momentum, they've kind of not seized it, which has been very uncharacteristic for this team, because, you know, going back over the last 2 or 3 years, they have seized those moments. They have put the nail in the coffin, whereas you know, it's almost like they've missed the nail. You know, they've hit the thumb, and Australia have then picked it back up, and then it's been hard then to push back against that momentum. So, you know, in Stokes' post-match review, he was kind of commenting on there was probably 3 or 4 occasions where in this Adelaide test that they could have seized the upper hand, and for whatever reason just didn't. And you know, it's hard to understand that, I think, but Australia have just been so relentless, and I think that's what gives them the momentum, is just how relentless they've been with bat balls. Look at some of the worldies they've taken in the field. Like, you know, you see how then it morphs from you bat well, you bowl well, to then you field unbelievably well. And it's, you know, it's almost impossible. It's like batting against the tsunami, isn't it? Or playing against the tsunami. So.
It's interesting you mentioned moments there, because I think the second innings, England's second innings here, the 2 shots where Harry Brook's reverse sweep where he got bowled by Lyon, and then Jamie Smith getting out trying to hit his 4th ball in a row, or his 5th ball in a row, whatever it was, for 4. Those are the shots that are going to be put on the dossier, on the video review when this all lands back in the UK and they review what's going on. Those are the kind of shots that are what's going to be shown. How do you sort of translate that if we look at a little bit more positive, Baldy, from an Australian point of view? Those moments where England have slipped, what moments have you loved over the series so far that Australia have absolutely taken it by the scruff of the neck?
Yeah, I think the Australian ability to dismiss the top order has been a real highlight for me. And, you know, I've long been a critic of Australia's inability to bowl out the lower order, and England showed plenty of fight in both innings of this test match, from 5 wickets down and beyond. They were, 5 for 130 in the first innings, ended up 286. What were they in the second innings? 5 for 189, ended up 352. So the lower order is, you know, being asked to do the job with bat and ball for England, and then by and large they're delivering and delivered in both innings in this test match. But I think the thing that Australia have continued to do well is prize out those key wickets when they needed them, and none better in this test match than Nathan Lyon. His little spell of, what was it, 3 for 15 off his 7 or 8 overs, where he got Harry Brook was the key wicket at that point, reverse sweeping. Then he bowled an absolute worldie. I mean, Stu Lipshaw's not on this program because he's still having a lie down and recovering from that ball that got Ben Stokes out. Stu, we wish you a speedy recovery from that moment. But then he goes on and gets, you know, the man who said, he gets Zach Crawley stumped by Carey, a great piece of keeping to the arm ball, and all of a sudden the complexion of the game changes. And what I've liked about Australia in those moments is not only are they taking those advantages with the ball, but by and large with the bat. And I know we lost sort of 6 for 40, I think, to close out the second innings, which, you know, we could be critical of that moment, but they'd got themselves enough runs on the board that wasn't a fundamentally critical game-losing error. We've still made plenty of errors in this test match. And if we're picking nits, if we're really diving into some of the minutiae, we could be critical of some of the moments that Australia have produced in this game. But by and large, they've identified the key moment. They've done something spectacular, but they haven't pushed for that spectacular thing to happen. They've allowed it to happen through 40 or 50 or 60 pieces of good cricket leading up to it. They've built pressure with the ball. They've been disciplined with their bowling. They've been disciplined with their fielding. They've been, by and large, 1 or 2 guys that I want to come on to notwithstanding, been reasonably disciplined with their batting. You know, here and there they're going to make mental mistakes, and we'll come on to that. But I think Australia have been really disciplined so far in this series, and I think that's where the contest has been won and lost.
Can we come? I want to come back to you, Baldy, and we'll talk about Stark, Cummins, Head, Khawaja, Carey in a little bit. But I want to hear your thoughts on Cameron Green. They've been sort of flying through the text channels that we've got today.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me your thoughts on Cameron Green so far this series.
Yeah, I mean, going back to our text conversation, I'm really conflicted about Cameron Green at this moment in his test career. So this is his 35th test match, and he shows tremendous amounts of promise, doesn't he? He's an amazingly talented cricketer. You have a look this week, he was picked up for multi-million dollars in the IPL, and you have a look at his ability to put together that match-winning innings when we watched him in New Zealand, that 174 not out. And you look at that guy and go, wow, this guy is an absolute world beater. He has the potential to be a superstar of our game. But then you have a look at his record after 35 tests, and he averages 32 with the bat and 37 with the ball. And you have a look at his contemporaries. So Marsh and Webster, very, very, very similar output to both of those two players. I mean, Webster's, I think, 34 and change with the bat, 23 and bit with the ball. So a much better bowling record. Marsh is about the same with the bat. But then you go back another 40 years and you have a look at all the players that have played that same amount of test cricket, 35 tests or more. And his batting average is more comparable to an Ian Healy, a Rod Marsh, a Graham Wood. Admittedly, Graham Wood faced the West Indies fast bowlers for his entire career, so you can see why his average is a bit down. But there's this disconnect between potential and performance that has, I think, a lot of fans of Cameron Green, or a lot of Australian cricket fans, really, really conflicted at the moment. So what I need from you guys is some help here. Help me put Cameron Green into context. Should we be continuing to trade on his potential, or should we be looking at his performance and going, we actually need more out of this guy, right? And you have a look at the two dismissals in this test match. Very, very soft dismissal. I think just after lunch, Marnus had got out and he kind of flicked, who was it? He flicked one of the spinners, I think, to mid-wicket. Very, very soft dismissal, and then fished outside off stump driving, having missed the two previous ones trying to drive as well. So there's this real disconnect that I have, and I need you guys to help me out with it.
So I think
I guess
Archer was the spinner you're referring to there, Baldy. You might not like that.
Oh, I hope he doesn't ever come on the pod. Was it Archer that he chipped to mid wicket in the second innings?
Archer bowled. So. Archer caught Cast in the first innings, and then Stokes. Tongue and Brook in the second innings.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, back to you, Jamie.
Yeah, go for it, Jamie.
Yeah, I was just wondering, at what point. You've got potential, but he's played over 30 test matches. So kind of, is this what you're going to get? Is this it? 30 test matches is a pretty large sample size to kind of understand maybe what a player is about. So, is this it? Is this Cameron Green at test level? Is this as good as he will be in this arena? Or is it a case of, do you stick and persevere and see where you can get to? As an observer of him, I always think there is definitely more to come. I think, his kind of body language, I think, says a lot for me. But he's an imposing character physically, but he doesn't look like that as a cricketer. He kind of looks fairly standoffish. And I'm not saying you've got to get grisly and get up front and personal, but if there was an element, a bit more of an assertiveness and aggression, and he would argue that's his demeanour, and that's fine. But I think just need a little bit more from him there in terms of understanding of his ability and his potential and his ceiling. And maybe it's a confidence thing, in and around his contemporaries, and he's playing in and around Steve Smith and these guys, and maybe it's a feeling of kind of, in awe. Maybe it's that, but I definitely think that I would want more from him, absolutely. But 30-odd test matches, what do you do? Do you kind of stick or twist? It's not like he's played 4 test matches or 1 series. He's done a lot, really.
He has been around for a while, and I guess to give him a bunch of credit, he performed reasonably well in that West Indies series when everybody struggled. He made a couple of innings at the back end of that West Indies series, and you could see him building what looked like he was building towards something. And I think that's the other frustrating thing, right? It's not that he just plays these dinky shots sometimes and gets out with what looks like soft dismissals, but you could see like there's something there, and it builds, but it never quite gets to the crescendo that we're hoping for. Raj, can you frame it another way for me? Can you help me out here?
So I guess just to sort of cut through that a little bit, what you're telling me is that when Cameron Green has a really defined role, he excels, is what you're telling me, such as he did in that West Indies series.
It seemed like if you give, like, he had a lot of responsibility to bear, and I think he was just starting to get to terms with it.
The base of my argument, which I'm going to completely disagree with both of you here, is that I think that he has, in his time in international cricket, his role has never really been defined. We know that he can bat. We know he can bat well. When he was told, you're going to bat at 3 in this series, we want you to go out there and score runs, don't worry about bowling, he went away and did that. And it was really successful, as you mentioned. And you may not remember this, Baldy, but when we did the preview to the Ashes, a mere sort of 6 weeks ago, or felt like 6 weeks ago, maybe it was less than that, I got really grumpy at you, going, why are we moving Cameron Green to 6 in this in this series? I mean, we've told him, go out there, be a batsman, and if you get a couple of overs, you get a couple of overs. But at the end of the day, his batting has never been the discipline that we've worried about. We've said he can score runs. We know he can score runs. It's just how he can use his body, how he can use his massive frame and get wickets when they need to. That first innings, he bowled 11 overs, 33 for 1. That's actually a great return for him in terms of if he could do that every test match. Fine, that's exactly what we need as the role he's going to play, batting at 6 or batting at 4, wherever he wants to bat, and then roll a couple of overs roll his arm over for a couple of overs and try and break a partnership, and that's what he did. And that's my basis of the argument, is that he has never really been given a clear role. The statistics that we saw earlier in the week, where I think someone posted, him against Shane Watson, the sort of massive difference between those two is Shane Watson started opening the batting very, very early in his career. He was given a well-defined role. You go out there, you score runs. And then his critics will say, as soon as the DRS came in, he reviewed everything anyway, so he was never out. But I think that he's missing that defined role. This is your job. You go out and do that. And the fact is, if he had a New Zealand passport, he's walking into our team. He's walking into our 11. I don't know, I can't say that for England as well, but I'm sure if he had an English passport, a UK passport, I'm pretty sure he's on the plane to the Ashes coming here and playing as well. He's one of those players that's just going to walk into most international teams anyway. So maybe we're just being a bit harsh on him. And
but what is he? What is he though? Is he a batter or is he an all rounder? Because I think it's a great point. Yeah.
Personally,
about role
I think
clarity.
Personally, I think he's a batter that can bowl a few overs and take a wicket when required. But he can bat in the top 5. I can see it.
Okay, so I think what we're saying is if he's a batter who can bowl a bit, then his bowling average of 37, it's about 37 now. Let's say it comes down to about 35, right? Let's say career-wise, it comes back a little bit. He's certainly quite good at breaking partnerships, right? He's taken a couple of quick key wickets. I think he took the wicket of Brooke, I think, in one of the test matches. He took that critical wicket of Pope LBW in Perth when England were looking pretty set. So, I totally agree with you in that if his role is to break a partnership and average kind of 35 and give our bowlers a break as the 5th bowler, I'm quite happy with that as being his role. But for him to be effective as a top 5 batter for Australia, what's his pass mark then from an average perspective? It needs to be closer to 40 than 30, right? Like we need to see an uptick in his batting performance. Would you agree, Raj?
I would. My retort to that would be, would you take an average of 35.45 with the bat and 31.42 with the ball? Or would you still say that's mediocre to, are you actually having an impact?
No, if he was to average, so if he was to average 36 to 37 with the bat and low 30s to under 30 with the ball, then that is a massive positive differential between bat and ball, right? And that's what you're looking for from your all-rounder. So the great all-rounders of all time have a positive differential of plus something, right? Whether it's Jaddu, who was like plus 10 or 12, Keith Miller was plus a million. But a good all-rounder should give you something positive between bat and ball. And at the moment with Cameron Green, he's about -5. if we could bring that back to parity or just on the other side of parity, I think that would be a great outcome for Australia. But that would mean his bowling average coming down 5 or his batting average going up 5. And if he could do both, then that's amazing. But something's got to click for him, I think, going forward, right?
So those numbers that I used were actually those are Ben Stokes' current numbers.
Yeah.
And I feel like Binksy on our chat earlier this week called him the second best English all-rounder of all time, Stokes. But his numbers aren't world beating like that. I mean, they're good. He's got a positive differential of 4, like you mentioned there. But that's not something that is a massive jump from where Cameron Green is right now.
No, I would agree with you, but I think something's got to change in his mindset, right? So it's almost like, and help me out here again, guys. It's almost like it's got to go one or two ways. It's got to be that he goes up to number 3 or 4 or whatever. Like, he's got to get a message that, like, it is your responsibility to score runs here and the bowling is okay. Or you drop him down to 7, he bats below Carey and goes, okay, cool. If you're going to average 32 with the bat, we also need you to deliver more from us with the ball. And if you want to be this attacking, swashbuckling batter, then your place in this team is to bat at number 7 behind Carey and go out and smash bowlers when they're tired and really take full advantage. But you're also now obligated to average low 30s with the ball. Like, which way would you guys go with Carey? Raj, which way would you go?
Sorry, say that again.
Would you like? If I was the Australian selectors, I'd want to send him a message. So, like, what we're doing with you now is not working, right? Whether it's role clarity or mindset or whatever. And I think you might be right in the role clarity piece. So, which way would you go? Would you promote him up the order to give him more responsibility? Or would you drop him down the order to free him up a little bit and go, well, we actually want you to bowl a little bit more for us. And batting at 7, you can be a little bit freer in terms of your mindset.
I personally would put him up the order. I think if they told him in that West Indies series he was going to bat 3, I liked it. I liked the look of it. It's hard for a man of his frame and size to bowl 20 overs a day. I'd rather see him bowl a handful of overs and score a lot of runs. So that's what I would do with him. What about you, Jamie?
Yeah, I'd put him up the order. I'd bat him 4, I think, or 3. Yeah, 3 or 4. But I'd be expecting that average to go up as a consequence of that. I think, again, if you give him that role clarity, say your first role, your money earner is your runs. I'd want him to be averaging close to 40. Although I'd take what he's offering at the moment from an England perspective, but yeah, I'd want him to be getting close to 40 with that, and then maybe to have a kind of, like you say, a partnership breaking role or a fifth bowler type role. Then, but if the rhetoric is different, and they see him as a batting at 6 or 7 as a genuinely dual task all rounder, then that kind of has different implications for him, because his average isn't going to be 40. Is it, batting at 6 or 7? So, yeah, I probably thought that maybe 3's too high for him. But,
you could see if he started to produce consistently, his long-term spot in the Australian team is probably somewhere around that number 4 spot, right? Once Steve Smith sort of retires, you can see him, if he was performing well now, and he built on that West Indies series where he was starting to build a little bit of momentum, and he had 3 or 4 scores in this series in that 50 to 70 range. Maybe he has 100 somewhere in there, and when we're talking about a guy who's got 230 runs in this series at an average of, 35, as opposed to 76 runs in this series and an average of 15, we're talking about 2 very different things here, right? And so
absolutely.
I think that's the real challenge that we've got at the moment. But we're really picking nits here. There's lots of players that we can single out for praise for this Australian team.
Just before you move on, Baldy, that was what I was sort of saying to you this morning. Is you don't need to fix something that's not broken. Everything seems to be going well. He is contributing at times. I know he didn't contribute as much during this test, but he's got 1400s in first class cricket. Like, he's too good for first class cricket. He should be playing the international game. But yeah, let's talk about all the other good stuff that's been going on.
I think maybe the point comes from, though, as a source of frustration when as an observer, when you kind of see like a natural talent and you see the ability, and you don't always see it flourishing in the way in which you want it to, and there can be a number of factors behind that. Either it is role clarity, or it's the environment, or it's the individual, and I think it comes from a place of where we can see all this, but maybe it's not living. It's not coming to fruition as much as we would probably want as connoisseurs of cricket, of people that want to see the best players. He is a natural talent, but it's just not quite cutting it. Not in the way, but like as Rod says, it's not necessarily broke either. So
No.
Yeah.
And he's not the only prodigious talent who struggled to produce big scores in this series, right? There are other.
Yeah.
That's not the right lead-in, Baldy. You've just won the Ashes 3-0. We need a little bit of excitement from you. And
So
talking about how good you are.
let me tell you what I am excited about. Let me tell you what I'm really excited about. I'm excited about two things. I might add a third in just for funsies. So I'm very, very excited about Travis Head at the top of the order. I think there was some speculation and some doubt as to whether or not this was a gimmicky Mickey Mouse thing, or whether or not it had legs. I think what we've seen from Travis Head is that on good pitches, even in the first innings, and this is where I think there were a lot of doubters, me included, can he handle the swinging ball? And the answer looks like it is yes. He has got the tools, maybe not the best technique in the world, but he's got the tools to be able to handle himself at the top of the order. Let's have a look at what it looks like when the ball's going around corners in England, or whether he has to go and face South Africa in South Africa. He'll face sterner challenges going forward, I'm sure. But in this series against this opponent, he has handled himself magnificently, and his 170 was just a sublime innings. And his fourth century in a row on the Adelaide Oval joins some pretty heady company in terms of Australians to do that on a particular ground. So I've been super impressed with the way Travis Head has got about his summer. I was also very, very impressed. Again, it's no surprise, with Alex Carey's 100 in the first innings. 100 in the first innings, 70 in the second innings. So he's been outstanding. He's been one of our best players alongside Head and Mitchell Starc in this series. So there's plenty to like about what Alex Carey is doing, and I actually think that he's going to push the boat out a little bit for Australia in terms of changing the dynamic of the team that we take into test matches now going forward, in that he can and should bat in the top six as long as he's in this kind of form. And what it does is it gives us an opportunity to play someone at number 7. Now, whether that's a specialist batter or whether that's more of an all-rounder type like Cameron Green or Bo Webster, we've got this opportunity now that if our top 5 is sorted, Alex Carey at number 6 gives us this extra balance to our team that we've not had since Gilchrist. We've just not had that, and his numbers are backing that up. So I'm super impressed with how he's performed so far in this series, and he's been magnificent. The other thing that I really was pleased by is Usman Khawaja, brought back into the middle order again in Adelaide, seems to like batting in the middle order in Adelaide, and made runs in the first innings, made runs in the second innings. Not great dismissals, let's be fair. The sweep shot down to deep square leg, deep mid wicket to get out in the first innings, and then the cut shot in the second innings was a bit of a brain fade there. But given how much he looked like he was struggling early on in the series, and also particularly in the West Indies where it was tough for batting, to be fair, for him to come out and look confident, score at a good clip, like he at strike rate 65 in the first innings. What was it? Second innings, 78. So that's a good strike rate without having to take risks. I actually think, and this is going to feel weird to say this, I actually think I would prefer him in that middle order somewhere because of how well he plays spin. And if we're going to go to the subcontinent, we're going to have guys playing spin all the time. I actually don't mind Usman Khawaja in that middle order. He sweeps well, he's organised, good defence, cut shot notwithstanding. I was really impressed by what he delivered for the team.
What was your third?
Oh, Carey, Head, Khawaja. They were my 3.
Okay.
And we've already talked about Nathan Lyon.
Yeah, can't disagree with you on any of those. The one I want to pick up on mostly is Alex Carey. His batting, as you said, absolutely sublime. I really enjoyed how he really just put them to all parts in both of those innings. He looked a cut above at the time in both of those innings. What has really stood out for me, though, is the impact he's had on the series as a wicketkeeper. It's been a long time since I've even thought that a wicketkeeper's had a really good time behind the stumps, standing up to the stumps, taking catches. Some of the sort of one-handers he's taken. Maybe it was only one of them I can remember in my head at the moment, but he's taken his catches. He stood up to the stumps. He's affected wickets by making sure the batsmen can't leave their crease. All of these things are just absolute positives. He's standing up to bowlers who are bowling 130, 135 Ks. Not easy to do, and he did it really well. He's had a massive impact on this series. His best yet, I think.
Oh, huge impact behind the stumps. I think it can't be underestimated, and you made a really good point, Raj. The impact that him up to the stumps is having on the England batters and their restriction of not being able to change the length that the Australian bowlers are going to bowl. I mean, we've seen Crawley, we've seen Brook in particular, mostly Brook, charge the bowlers when the keeper is back because they can then disturb the bowlers and hit them off their length. And that is a tactic that they've used successfully, Harry Brook in particular, to change the length that the bowler is going to be bowling and to put that bowler in two minds. Now with Carey up to the stumps, Scott Boland can just bowl the ball into the shoebox time and time again because he knows that the batter is going to have to change his shot routine in order to be able to combat that. He can't just come down the wicket and turn a good length ball into a half volley and blast it over cover, because if he misses, Carey will stump him, and he's been outstanding. So, yeah, a really good point that you made there, Raj, about the impact that he's having by being able to stand up to the stumps to those bowlers.
I think the really cool thing about Carey up to the stumps is that he's quite old school, and it shows you that even in a world of data and new innovations, that sometimes the old is best, and the seamer, the keeper up to the stumps, keeping the batsman in the crease, it still works. It's still a tactic. I'm not saying it's easy, and Carey has been unbelievable in terms of his ability to do that. And it's probably interesting that him coming up to the stumps and the confidence that he's gained from keeping well has then probably translated in terms of his batting as well. And it's kind of, again, just where we get confidence from. We do one skill particularly well, we get belief in that, and it translates into others. But yeah, I've been quite sort of pleased with that. It's a relatively old school tactic, and I've quite enjoyed watching that. But England haven't really had an answer to that either. It's not been, because it's not something you see, is it, that often?
No, it's a really innovative approach to what has been a strength of England. And previously what we've done is we've posted a deep point and tried and take away the boundary. But by taking the keeper up to the stumps, we've taken away the shot. We've taken away the mindset. And I think that's one of the things that's really messed with some of those batters' heads a little bit. And they've had to try and invent their way out of trouble. Do we have anything that we want to chat about on this game before we get to what's coming up? So Boxing Day test coming up in 3 or 4 days' time. There will be changes for Australia. Anything else that we want to cover before we move on to that stuff?
Yeah, just one thing I've got, and maybe I'll ask Jamie this one. What did you make of Pat Cummins? So I think him coming back into this test, he looked fresh. Obviously, he hasn't had to bowl at all in this series so far. Mitchell Starc was a little bit off this test, as his landing area looked a bit uneven, and he looked to be struggling with the bowling crease a lot during this test, actually, in general. But what did you make of Pat Cummins coming back into the side, his leadership, his bowling?
Yeah, I thought it was what you'd expect from Pat Cummins. I thought it was a really good return, given the absence and given the lack of bowling in that arena that he's done. Yeah, it's interesting, his comments now that we might not see him in Melbourne, so it makes me wonder whether it was a bit of a high risk strategy, relatively high risk strategy by Australia, that they kind of wanted to get the series wrapped up and were prepared to put eggs into that basket. But yeah, I thought it was as you would expect. I thought he was really good with the ball, took key wickets. I thought his leadership was as we've seen in the past, kind of just slotted in there as if he'd sort of not been away. The interesting thing about Mitchell Starc is I think we mentioned this before, but when Cummins isn't there, Starc sort of stepped up and became the main man, and And it's almost like with Cummins coming back in, you know, is there that sort of hierarchical shift again? Does Stark almost become not the main man, even though he's been exceptional and is the main, you know, has been the outstanding bowler for this series? But yeah, I thought he was very good. Yeah, it's a shame he's not English, but yeah, be interesting to see what the rest of the season looks like for him. You know, whether we see him again or whether they sort of wrap him up now and look at the longer term.
Yeah, it kind of hinted that he might not play Boxing Day, but he might play Sydney. I think that's a weird one for me because
it wasn't a hint, Baldy. He said, you know, I'm probably not going to play the next test.
Yeah. It's a pretty obvious hint, right? It's, you know, it wasn't subtly delivered and cloaked in you know, threads of gossamer. It was as subtle as a bat. What I thought was interesting though is that previously the Australian fast bowling cartel has been like, if I am fit, I am going to play. And sort of Stark is still continuing to deliver that message. I think, you know, all other things being equal, he would like to play every test. And I'm sure Scott Boland, having had to wait so long, probably also wants to play every test. But an interesting little change in mindset from Cummins, and maybe he's not 100% fit, because I think the only reason that he wouldn't play is if he still feels like he's coming back from that injury. But I think what Australia do with their bowling lineup then is going to be very interesting in Melbourne. We had Doggett and Neser miss out in this game that have both been very serviceable throughout this test match. I think Neser has had more impact courtesy of his 5 for in Brisbane. Doggett has been serviceable, but hasn't quite delivered in the sense that we kind of expected him to nip the ball about a bit, swing the ball, move the ball early doors, and cause problems that way. But he's been asked to do a different role, hasn't he? He's been asked to come on first change a lot of the time,
bowl short,
bowl into the wicket, bowl that bouncer strategy, that short ball strategy, particularly when the batters are set. And at 132 to 135 k's an hour or thereabouts, hasn't really been quick enough, Jofra Archer style, to really disturb the batters. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. Of course, Jai Richardson's back bowling. Let's hope that he stays fit. Touch wood that he stays fit between now and Boxing Day. He could be an option if Pat Cummins doesn't play. The big concern, I think, is what we do now without Nathan Lyon in the test side, because that hamstring injury looks like it's going to be one that will keep him out of the Boxing Day test, if not the rest of the series. And then what does Australia do going forward? Because I think we need a frontline spinner for the rest of this series. We saw the impact that he had bowling against Crawley, against Brook, against Stokes in that test match. He produced some absolute jaffers. And yeah, sure, we're going to have a drop-off between whoever gets picked after Nathan Lyon. You can't just replace 567 wickets at the drop of a hat. But like, it will be really interesting to have a look at what Australia do there, because we've got quite a number of options. None of them are stand out. We've got everything on the table from, you know, experienced campaigners like Matthew Kuhneman, Mitchell Swepson for Queensland. Then you've got the Todd Murphy, Corey Riccioli type players, you know, like for like off spinners. Both of them have been in and around the setup. Or do Australia go completely left field and pick Cooper Connolly as a frontline spinner? And I think, from what we've learned in the Adelaide test match, I think that's fraught with danger, because as good as Will Jacks was with the bat, and he was excellent, his inability to build pressure with the ball led Australia off the hook in that test match. Yeah. Would you agree? Like, I think, and again, massive departure for England from their stated strategy of we pick our bowling attack to take 20 wickets. It felt to me like they picked Will Jacks not for his bowling ability, but for his batting ability, which was hugely important and hugely impactful on the batting side. But on the bowling side, he just didn't look like he had much penetration at all, Jamie.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think, you know, it'd be kind of like 3 or 4 balls in the right area, and then you'd get two giveaways, and the pressure would be relinquished. And yeah, again, role clarity, and for him, perhaps kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, but felt like he was brought in to bolster the batting rather than to take wickets, but then ultimately ended up having to bowl quite a bit because of the conditions. So yeah, kind of a a weird selection. I can see why he was selected from a batting point of view, but then from a bowling perspective, kind of it didn't quite work out. Probably not of that caliber yet to kind of bowl, in test matches and turn the screw and build pressure. Kind of there's probably some technical. Stu's more equipped to comment on this, but probably some technical things that need to happen to him in terms of his bowling to enable that kind of repetition. I think moving forward, but a strange departure as well from the kind of the Bashir sort of narrative that's been wielded around for kind of like the last 2 years. And, I'm sure we'll get into that in kind of the end of the series, but just a very strange departure.
To pick up on your question, Baldy, just around part-time spinner or Cooper Conley. You know how I feel about Cooper Conley. I'm in love with him. I think that he's going to be a very, very good international cricketer for a long time to come. But this is not the spot where he needs to come in as a frontline spin bowler. I think they should be bringing in a full timer. I'd like you to nail your colours to the mast. Who are you picking as the if you were George Bailey? Who's your spinner for the Boxing Day Test?
I haven't had a look at the Sheffield Shield most wickets, but I think on what we've seen in terms of the hierarchy and the pecking order, I think it's going to be Murphy. I'd have to go and check the stats for the Sheffield Shield to see who's taken more wickets. I think Riccioli might have more wickets. I think Murphy might have a slightly better average. The last time I looked at the stats, it was a wee while ago. But I think Murphy is probably the better player at this point. I feel like Cooper Connolly is in that same mould as Will Jacks, that if you were taking that guy as your number 8 and second spinner to a turning wicket, like say we knew it was going to turn in Sydney and we wanted to pick 2 spinners, Australia, and we needed a guy to bat at 7 or 8 and do that job, I think Cooper Connolly would be more than well positioned to be able to do that, and do that with a view that, okay, this guy is young, we're going to take him forward like we have with Cameron Green or with Sam Constance or with any of those other young players that England are thinking about going with, right? But I think to be able to go, okay, well, this guy's got 5 first-class wickets. He actually has only bowled about 70 overs in his first-class career. To stick him in as now the number 1 spinner in Melbourne and then Sydney against, an England attack or an England batting lineup that can do damage, hasn't done damage so far really en masse, but can do a lot of damage. I think that's asking too much of a young bowler. And I think, learning the lesson from Adelaide, England asked too much of Will Jacks in terms of being a frontline spinner, right? Having to bowl 40 overs across the test, had a sidecar in each innings. Like, it was a very, very unfortunate circumstance. And I think it's one of those rare instances where McCullum and Stokes didn't set up one of their teammates to be successful in the role that they asked of him, Will Jacks. And I certainly wouldn't want that on Cooper Connolly. So I would hope that their selectors go for Todd Murphy. I think he's the better of the 2 spinners between him and Riccioli. But if they went with Riccioli because he's got a better record in the Shield so far this season and they need him for 1 or 2 test matches and they want to have a look at him, I'm not averse to that at all.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Baldy. I believe didn't they have an A tour to India, and both of those guys played, Murphy and Riccioli.
Yeah,
played, and I think Todd Murphy was out bowled in that particular series. Do you think that would have any bearing on it?
Entirely possible. I mean, we can have a look at the recent form of Todd Murphy just now. I'll bring it up. So in his last 5 games, he's played 2 big bashes. He's got 1 for 15 and 1 for 26, so reasonably good returns in the big bash. He got 2 for 7 and 1 for 57 in the Lions game in Brisbane on the 5th of December, and then going back into the Shield, he got 1 for 51 and 3 for 102 against Queensland. So reasonable, but not brilliant. If we have a look at Corey, I'll just bring his stats up now.
Just while you're doing that, for those of you who haven't seen Cooper Connolly, he is smashing it away in the Big Bash at the moment at the top of the Scorchers batting order with a 59 in the first game and a 77 just the other day. So he is one to keep an eye on if you haven't seen him.
He is absolutely one to keep an eye on. But I would say that you probably want him to have at least another really good first-class season before we start talking about him as...
he's only 22. He's a young fella.
he's got plenty of time, right? I'm quite happy to kind of hold on him for a little while we just bring up these most wickets. So where's Corey? So Corey Riccioli in the Shield this year, 20 wickets at 28.2. The leading wicket taker has 24 wickets. So he's certainly right up there in terms of his Shield performances, right? First class average of 30. Where's his last few games? Yeah, so he's got like reasonable returns. He took 5 for against Queensland in the Shield game at the Wacker. He's taken multiple, like every time he's played, he's taken multiple wickets in the Shield so far this season. So, yeah, I think you could go with either of those two players for these last two tests. You're going to lose heaps without Lyon. You're going to lose so much in terms of experience, nous, the ability to build pressure, all that stuff. But I think if you're tossing up between Murphy and Riccioli, you're not losing much either way. And I think, you could find a camp that would describe one or the other as being the better option, and they'd both probably be right. Switching tack, though, Jamie, lots been talked about in terms of this England side and where they go to from here. Everything from, bowling changes. Prior to this test match, there was probably some rumours of whether or not they were going to change the wicketkeeper. Pope's almost certainly in the firing line now, is he not? What changes do you think England need to make for Melbourne, and what should they do going into this Boxing Day test match?
Well, if we follow sort of the rhetoric, they won't make any changes because they've been pretty dogged in by saying, this is our best 11, and they wholeheartedly back Pope, and they think he's one of the best players in the group, and etc. So, if we take that, I think then there won't be. But I think from our perspective, what would we like to see? Well, it's kind of like, is it the right time? And taking on Raj's point about throwing individuals in now, like is it the right time to throw Bethel in at 3? Is it the right time to bring Rue in? Or do you kind of just say, well, actually, no, it's better to blood them in our own backyard, in our familiar conditions, rather than, throw them to the wolves, and kind of scar them in their relatively early test careers. So, yeah, kind of bit of a mixed bag there, I think, in terms of the direction you go. Do you just say, okay, folks, carry on, you started this, see it through till the end, or do you change it up? The obvious change, I think, is Bethel or Pope, if you want to do that. Wicket keeping wise, again, I'm slightly unsure. I'm not being particularly definitive here. Bowling wise, does Atkinson come in? Do you rest Archer? Archer probably at the MCG is likely to be a handful, so I would keep him in, I think. Yeah, I'm not giving anything. I've got no idea. Part of me goes, just hand out some lottery tickets to the Barmy Army and pick a few from that. I'm kind of a bit confused because I don't really know what the England strategy is, because it's always been, this is our team, and a lot has been said about, it's kind of harder to get out the England team than it is to get in it, so it's...
Do you think that they will continue with the strategy that they had at the start of this series, or is this just a time to sort of change tack, go back to the drawing board, try something different with these two tests, which are essentially dead rubbers, right?
Yeah, I mean, part of me thinks that what we'll see is like Bazball being true to itself, because there's no pressure, that there's really no expectation. So I wouldn't be surprised if England do go out and absolutely do what they've done in the last 3 years, apart from this series, where they are dominant, because the expectation to play international cricket is still high, obviously, but the expectation around the series and the impact is low now. So, I wouldn't be surprised. Again, I'm kind of caught between two worlds, really. Do you just sort of just see this through to its end now, and then you do a big revamp and rebrand, if you want, in between the end of this series and the start of the English summer? I'm not sure how much, depends on how many of these players are going to be around in sort of 12 months' time. less than 12 months' time. And yeah, again, I'm not adding really anything of clarity because I'm just confused as to what I would do.
Can I ask you, Baldy, because Jamie makes a good point there. What does this team look like in 12 months? This team, whatever it looks like, I feel has Jofra Archer in it.
Yep.
He's bowled 80 odd overs already this series. Series is done. Do you wrap him up and sort of send him home, or what do you do with that Ferrari?
Oh, what message are you trying to send to Jofra Archer? I mean, he's been, I think, other than Stokes, England's best player in this series. And I wouldn't, if I was Ben Stokes, I would be saying, okay, you are still our best bowler. You are the leader of our attack. Are you prepared to continue to be the leader of our attack and look him in the eye? And if he's as steely-eyed as I think he would be, then he should continue as long as he is fit to be the leader of that attack. Does that mean he needs to bowl the most overs in each innings? Absolutely not. There needs to be other people in that attack prepared to do that extra work to allow him to be at his most effective. I think Josh Tongue has to play going forward. I think he looks to me like the guy who troubled Australia as much, if not more, than anyone else who wasn't named Jofra Archer in this test match. I think he provides a point of difference, comes, past the perpendicular, brings the ball into the Australian batters and makes those right-handers think about playing, which is why I think some of them, were a little bit tentative, particularly Josh Inglis. I mean, the way he nicked off, and that was Josh Tongue, I think, but certainly he looked like he was sort of forced to play at that line and length. So regardless of what they do around those two, I think those are the guys that have to play. Is it time to give Cass a rest, bring Atkinson in, and do something like that? I'm not quite sure. But I think you've got to have a look at, Jofra Archer needs to be leading the attack because I think he's the person who's most likely to take a big bag of wickets. But he also can't be, as you say, Raj, he has to be the Ferrari. He has to be short spells, sharp spells, high pace, high penetration, not being asked to bowl 9-10 over spells to do all of that grunt work to keep the pressure on. Because Australia sat on Archer a little bit in this test match, They let him bowl at 1.5, 2 runs and over, and then they went, right, okay, well, we're going to get 20 overs from Will Jackson this innings if we bat long enough. We can get 100 runs out of that. We don't have to get 70 runs off Jofra Archer necessarily. We can have him go at 2 and over as long as he doesn't take our wicket. We're kind of okay. So I think that's what they've got to do. Can I throw this out there and see what you guys think from a batting change perspective? We talked about clarity of role for Cameron Green. What if England were to put Harry Brook up to number 3 and go, you are the guy going forward. The responsibility for how we bat sits with you, right? You are responsible for how our innings plays out. You can attack all you want, but the responsibility sits with you. That gives the opportunity for Stokes to come up to number 5 and have a little bit more impact in terms of how long he can bat with the tail or with the lower order. And then you bring Jacob Bethel into the side at number 6. I mean, is that a real dumb move or does that have some merit to it, do you think, Raj?
I like it. I don't think that will be the plan. I think Jacob Bethel to sort of 3 has been how he did it when they came to New Zealand. He batted at 3 when that spot was open. But I like it. I like putting a little bit of responsibility onto players. Is Harry Brook good enough to bat at 3? I think he is. He doesn't seem to be phased by the ball doing a little bit or an extra bit of pace or that shine on the new ball. So I think that could be a great place for him to bat and a great place for England to get some momentum into their innings as well, because he's not going to sit there and leave and dead bat for 2 hours. He's going to go out there and play his natural game. And, he plays and misses a lot less than the other players who try that. So, yeah, I think it's a good idea. Whether I think it's realistic, I think Bethel is sort of the future number 3 for England. I think that would just be accelerated probably, but I like the idea.
Jamie?
Yeah, me too. But whether that is... I also agree with Raj that I think the long-term plan is Bethel at 3, but I think that is a longer-term plan. For me, I'm not sure Bethel comes into the Ashes just because of the potential scarring that may have, although he has played international cricket before, so it's not like he's making a debut, as it were. So, yeah, But no, I like the added responsibility. I think again, Brook looks like he's sort of kind of given this license, but then you need responsibility from him in the role that he has. But maybe putting him at 3 just helps to you do set the tone. You live and die by how you bat a little bit, like you're saying. Maybe that helps. It certainly gets Stokes a bit higher up the order. But is 5 too high for Stokes? Would be my only.
Look, ostensibly, yeah. I mean, if you look at it in terms of his, like, it's a bit like the Cameron Green conversation. If you look at it just in terms of his numbers, his numbers aren't there. But the way he's batting at the moment, he's the glue in that middle order. He's prepared to bat at a 50 strike rate, or maybe even less sometimes, and have guys bat around him. And you think, well, okay, well, if you could have Bethel bat with him for a long time, or you could have Root bat with him for a long time, or even Harry Brook bat with him for a long time, or Jamie Smith, or whatever, guys around him, rather than him batting with, having to bat with Cass and Archer and Will Jacks for long periods. England could do Australia a lot more damage, I think. So, as a batting partner that holds his team together, I think that's where you're going to get heaps of value out of Ben Stokes, not just solely in terms of his raw output, right?
Can I ask you a question?
You've sold it to me. You've sold it to me, mate.
Sold at auction. Before I'll ask you a question, and maybe we're probably getting towards wrapping this up. This has gone very long, Baldy.
Yeah, it has, hasn't it?
You need to rule with a bit more of an iron fist, I feel.
I'll be less conciliatory going forward, I promise you.
Yes. So it's very possible. We talked about, who they're going to leave out. This is Australia we're talking about. It's very possible that we see a bowling attack led by Scott Boland with support from the likes of Nessa and Jai Richardson. I've seen his name floating around, and another spinner on Boxing Day. What is the likelihood of, Stark and Cummins and all of these guys sitting out?
I would hope that they don't. I would hate for Australia to cheapen the experience for England by resting a whole bunch of bowlers en masse for the sake of doing so. And I would certainly hate for Australia to holeless bowlers change their bowling attack with no upside outcome to that. I think even if England were to win a test match in that circumstance, there would be this asterisk against England if Australia rested all of their bowlers and maybe had Boland, Nisa, Doggett, Jai Richardson, or Xavier Bartlett got a test debut. I wouldn't mind if Bartlett got a test debut, but I would want him to be the third seamer, not having to carry the attack on alongside just Boland. I would like to see Stark and Boland continue to play, particularly if Cummins doesn't play. I'm always a fan of, if you've got an opposition team, on the ropes, don't let them back in. Continue to press the advantage. So I would hate to see Australia give up the advantage that way. The real consideration for me is, what does Australia do when and if Stephen Smith is fit for Boxing Day? Does Usman Khawaja drop out the side and leave Josh Inglis at number 7? Do we have Smith coming back into the side at number 4 and Usman Khawaja drops down to number 7 himself, or drops to 6 and Carey to 7? There are so many different possible permutations of those adjustments that Australia might make. And that's why the Cameron Green conundrum is so interesting, right? Because what do you do with that middle order? That, from Khawaja's perspective, he's done nothing wrong. Josh Inglis hasn't really set the world on fire in this series and the opportunities that he's got, but he is batting at number 7. So, how much damage are you expecting him to do in that position? So that's the interesting thing for me. I think, if you have a look at it, Khawaja does need to retain his spot, but it's much more likely to be at 6, maybe even number 7, than it is at the top of the order at the moment.
Mm.
Boys, we talked about whether or not we were going to cover the West Indies New Zealand series. We probably should cover it a little bit before we jump off the pod. We are over an hour in now, and we would be remiss if we didn't. I think Stu would want to come on and have a longer conversation, I think, wrapping up that series in some more detail. But so many records falling at Mount Maunganui, it's hard to really put a finger on what we want to talk about. But in the end, it was a really, really good victory for New Zealand off the top of some historic batting. And I think we need to come to you for a perspective on one Devon Conway to start with, I think, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I think, look, you're right. We should do a proper summary or a review when Stu's back for the end of the year. But look, Conway's been building all all season long. He's been building to this point, and he's gone out there and he's scored this big daddy 100 or double 100 in the first innings, and backed that up with another 100. I think, and Latham scored 100 in each innings as well. First time that's happened in international cricket. Openers scoring 400s amongst them. They batted really, really well. I really liked it. I'm sort of just going to rattle through a few things that I really liked in this Test match. I liked Patel. Ajaz Patel coming in and playing his part. Not only was he sort of a holding spinner, but he was a wicket-taking threat all the way down to that fifth day. Duffy, I think we need to build a statue in tribute to him, especially when Stu comes back to talk about him. He racked up the records, most wickets in a calendar year by a New Zealander, most wickets ever in a series, taking both of those records off Sir Richard Hadley. And the main thing that sort of I wanted to talk about was that I actually really loved this pitch. It was a real old school cricket pitch where, the batsmen executed better on the first 2 days, but there was actually something in the wicket for both teams, but they just didn't really take advantage of it with the ball. And then it broke up beautifully on day 4, and then day 5 spin came into it, as well as some sort of craziness off the cracks. Look, it was a great test. I think we expected New Zealand to win sort of 2 or 3-0, and they did that job. They really should have won 3-0 if you take the sort of record-breaking draw in the first test out of it, where West Indies played out of their skin. But this is exactly what we were looking for as a sort of New Zealand team at home. And we look forward to the white ball series of India that we're about to head off on in the new year. How was that for a summary, Baldy?
Oh,
We may have lost Baldy. How was that for a summary, Jamie? Was there anything you wanted to pick up on that?
I thought that was an excellent summary, Raj. Yeah, and I think fascinating that, the openers, scoring. I'm just looking at the scorecard, and it just looks weird. Like you say, the first time it's probably ever happened. So really interesting, really unique.
Okay, Baldy's looking at us very blankly. He's messaged me to say take us out when we've had the chat about New Zealand. Like he said earlier, I think we should do a review. We'll do a New Zealand review towards the end of the podcast, probably when we summarise the Boxing Day test as well. But for tonight, as Binksy would say, good night and God bless. And we will see you next time on the Top Order podcast.